Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, The Call from the Countryside. It was one of those dreary London afternoons when the sky seemed to sag beneath the weight of its own gloom. The rain had been falling since morning, a steady drizzle that turned the pavements into mirrors and the Thames into a ribbon of steel. Within the warm, orderly confines of his flat in Whitehaven Mansions, Hercule Poirot sat at his writing desk, polishing, most industriously, his already impeccable silver pen. To any other man, such an occupation might have seemed unnecessary. To Poirot, it was an expression of philosophy. The order, the precision, the symmetry, he would often say, these are not mere habits, mon ami, they are the foundation of civilization. Captain Hastings, sprawled comfortably in an armchair with a newspaper on his knee, looked up from an article about a recent motor race. You know, Poirot, he remarked, I can't imagine how you endure sitting indoors on a day like this. Nothing ever happens here anymore. Not since that business with the banker's daughter. Poirot's eyes twinkled. You complain, Hastings, because you are restless. You Englishmen are like the tea, you must be stirred, else you grow dull. But patience, my friend. Crime, like the rain, falls when one least expects it. He had scarcely finished the sentence when there came a sharp knock at the door. The landlady entered, bearing a letter upon a small silver tray. For you, Mr. Poirot, she said, and departed with the reverence of one accustomed to mystery. Poirot took the envelope delicately, studying it as though it were a suspect under interrogation. Aha, he murmured, a fine paper, but inexpensive. The handwriting, neat, yet trembling. A woman's hand, elderly perhaps, one who writes seldom but with care. The ink, slightly faded, suggesting an old pen. Hastings, I predict the contents will be both urgent and anxious. Good heavens, Poirot, said Hastings, laughing, you haven't even opened it. Poirot smiled, broke the seal with precision, and unfolded the letter. His expression changed at once from amusement to interest. Monsieur Poirot, I beg of you to come to Hartleigh-on-the-Moor at once. A terrible thing is happening here, and I fear for my master's life. He speaks of a visitor who comes each night at midnight, a visitor whom no one sees but him. The servants are frightened, and I, who have been in this house for 20 years, am more afraid than I have ever been in my life. I implore you, do not delay. Murder will come to Hartleigh House before the week is out. Your obedient servant, Eleanor Vale. The silence that followed was broken only by the ticking of the mantel clock. Hastings whistled softly. Murder before the week is out, eh? That sounds more like your sort of weather, Poirot. Poirot read the letter again, his brow furrowing slightly. Eleanor Vale, he mused. An English name of the old school, governess, perhaps. She writes of fear, yet with dignity. And the phrase a visitor at midnight, that, Hastings, has the flavor of legend, of the supernatural. But remember what I have always said, the most mysterious of happenings often conceal the most practical of motives. He folded the letter neatly and placed it beside his teacup. Yes, my friend, we shall go to Hartleigh-on-the-Moor. Hastings brightened. Capital. A proper country case. You know, I've always liked these big old houses, ancestral portraits, family secrets, that sort of thing. Where is it, exactly? Poirot consulted the letter once more. Yorkshire. Near the village of Hartleigh-on-the-Moor. It will be cold, damp, and extremely inconvenient. You will require your thickest coat, mon ami. Right you are, said Hastings cheerfully, rising to fetch his hat. When do we start? Poirot smiled. Immediately, my dear Hastings. Murder, I fear, does not wait upon fine weather. The following afternoon found the two men seated in the corner of a northbound train. Outside the window, the countryside unrolled in shades of grey and brown, the rain a thin veil between earth and sky. Hastings, content with the rhythm of the journey, watched the hedgerows flash by. Poirot, on the other hand, sat as still as a statue, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, eyes half closed in reflection. Thinking over the letter, Hastings asked. "Indeed," said Poirot softly. "There is something curious about it. The writer says her master speaks of a visitor, yet she herself has not seen this phantom. That is already one little point of interest. Then, too, she speaks of fear, but not despair. Fear, Hastings, is often born of ignorance, but despair, that comes from knowledge. So, Mademoiselle Vale fears what she does not understand. That, I think, is promising." Hastings grinned. "You mean it's more likely to be flesh and blood than ghostly?" "Precisely. The supernatural, mon ami, is merely the natural misunderstood." Poirot smiled faintly. "Though I confess, the English countryside, with its moors and its mists, lends itself admirably to melodrama." As the train drew nearer to its destination, the sky grew darker, the land wilder. By the time they alighted at the small, windswept station of Hartleigh, the daylight had begun to fail. A solitary carriage waited for them, driven by a man whose face was almost hidden beneath a dripping hat. "From Hartleigh House, sir," he said briefly, touching his cap. The drive through the moorland was long and silent. The road wound between rolling hills, their heather slick with rain, and in the distance, lightning flickered above the horizon like the flash of a camera capturing an ancient scene. At last, through the haze of drizzle, the shape of Hartleigh House appeared, a large Georgian mansion standing alone upon a rise, its windows dark, its stone walls streaked with ivy. There was an air of melancholy grandeur about it, as though the house itself had grown weary of its own secrets. As they approached the great door, Hastings felt a small chill run down his spine. "Looks a bit grim, doesn't it?" he muttered. Poirot, stepping out with his usual elegance, merely adjusted his hat. "A house is like a person, Hastings. It reflects the temperament of those who dwell within. We shall see if Hartleigh House smiles or frowns upon its guests." The door was opened by a tall, grey-haired woman in black. Her face was lined but resolute, and her eyes, clear, sharp, and weary, confirmed Poirot's deduction at once. "Miss Vale?" he asked gently. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot." "You received my letter?" "I did, mademoiselle," said Poirot, bowing slightly. "And we come, you see, without delay." She glanced anxiously over her shoulder into the dim hall. "Thank you, sir. You are in time, I hope, but only just. Sir Adrian has taken to locking himself in his study after dark. He says the visitor comes for him tonight." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then, Miss Vale, it is indeed fortunate that you sent for Hercule Poirot. For if there is a visitor to come, be he man, woman, or phantom, we shall greet him together, OUI. Miss Vale shuddered slightly, but she nodded. "As you wish, sir. God help us all if you are too late." As Poirot stepped into the great hall, Hastings following close behind, the door closed heavily behind them, shutting out the moorland wind. Somewhere deep within the house, a clock began to chime the hour, 8 o'clock. And in that sombre echoing sound, Poirot felt the first whisper of danger, quiet, unmistakable, and very much alive. Chapter 2, The House of Uneasy Shadows. Hartleigh House loomed larger as they entered, its interior just as forbidding as its outward face. The great entrance hall was a cavern of polished oak and echoing silence. A vast staircase rose before them, its banister gleaming with age and care. Along the walls hung portraits of long-dead lieutenants, their painted eyes following each movement with solemn disapproval. Somewhere in the distance, a clock ticked, a slow, measured sound, like the beating of a heart. Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping the space with quiet appreciation. "Ah," he murmured, "a house of fine proportions, but not of happiness." "You feel it, Hastings?" "The air is heavy, with sadness." Hastings shivered slightly. "It's the draft, old chapter. These old places always feel like they've something on their conscience." Miss Vale, who had stood quietly at his side, now gestured toward a set of double doors leading off the hall. "If you will follow me, gentlemen. Sir Adrian will receive you in the drawing room." Inside, the atmosphere softened somewhat. A fire crackled in the grate, sending up golden tongues of warmth that fought against the evening chill. The room was handsomely furnished, though a little old-fashioned, heavy curtains, dark velvet chairs, and a grand piano that looked as though it had not been opened in years. Before the fire stood a man in late middle age, tall, silver-haired, with the rugged look of one accustomed to travel and danger. His face, though handsome, bore the weariness of long experience, and his eyes, deep-set and thoughtful, rested with quiet curiosity upon the visitors. "Sir Adrian Lytton," Miss Vale announced. "Monsieur Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings." Sir Adrian extended his hand. "Monsieur Poirot, I am deeply obliged to you for coming on such short notice. Miss Vale tells me you are a man of remarkable gifts." Poirot inclined his head modestly. "I do what I can, monsieur. I understand there is some inquietude in this house." Sir Adrian's expression hardened. "Inquietude, yes. I might even say terror. But not mine, Monsieur Poirot, others." He motioned for them to sit. "I dare say you have heard Miss Vale's version of events. You will wish for mine. It is simple enough. For several nights now, I have been visited, each night precisely at midnight, by a figure that appears outside my study window. Cloaked, silent, unmoving. It looks in, and then vanishes." Hastings leaned forward, intrigued. "And you're certain it's not imagination, sir? Shadows can play tricks, you know." Sir Adrian gave a mirthless smile. "I have spent half my life in deserts and jungles, Captain Hastings. I know the difference between fancy and fact. I have seen this visitor with my own eyes." "Has anyone else seen it?" asked Poirot. "No. The servants sleep at the back of the house, and my wife will not come near the study after dark. Miss Vale says she has heard footsteps in the corridor, but she has seen nothing. Yet, the feeling in the house has changed. One can sense how shall I put it, the approach of something inevitable." Poirot nodded slowly. "And you, monsieur, have no suspicion of who or what this visitor may be?" "None," Sir Adrian said quietly. "Though I confess, it stirs old memories. I once led an expedition in Egypt. There was an incident, a curse spoken, perhaps in jest, perhaps not. I did not believe in such things then. I do not now. But still, when one sees a shadow that should not be there." He broke off, staring into the fire. The flames flickered against his face, highlighting the furrows of unease. Poirot regarded him closely. "You are a man who has faced danger, yet something here unnerves you. That is curious. Fear, Monsieur Lytton, is most revealing. It tells us not of ghosts, but of guilt." The door opened quietly, and a woman entered. She was young, perhaps 30, dark-haired and strikingly beautiful, with eyes of an extraordinary grey-green hue. Her presence seemed to draw all light towards her. "My wife, Lady Catherine," Sir Adrian said with a faint smile. "My dear, this is Monsieur Poirot, the detective." Lady Catherine extended a delicate hand. "Monsieur Poirot, how kind of you to come. You will forgive us if our household is rather gloomy. My husband has not been himself of late." Her tone was soft, yet Poirot noted a flicker, too swift for Hastings to see, of impatience in her eyes. "You are troubled by these visits, madam?" he asked. She laughed lightly. "Not I. I have seen nothing, and I prefer not to. I am far too practical to believe in spectres." "But Adrian," she hesitated, then smiled again. "He has been under strain. His health has suffered since his return from Egypt." Sir Adrian frowned. "Catherine, please." Her hand came to rest gently on his shoulder. "Forgive me, my dear. I speak only from concern." Poirot's gaze lingered thoughtfully on the pair. "It is always of interest," he said softly, "to observe how fear travels. It moves from one heart to another, changing its shape as it goes." Lady Catherine turned gracefully toward Miss Vale. "Eleanor, do see that rooms are prepared for our guests." Then, with a faint, charming smile to Poirot, "You will dine with us, of course. We keep to old-fashioned hours here, 7 o'clock. When she had gone, Miss Vale looked after her with a faint tightening of the lips. "She does not believe, Monsieur Poirot." "None of them do. But I tell you, or the visitor is real. I have heard the window creak open, the clock strike 12, and then footsteps in the hall." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And you, Mademoiselle Vale, are not afraid?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I am terrified." Dinner was served in a long, dimly lit room where the silver gleamed and the candles sputtered in the draught. Around the table sat the household, Sir Adrian at the head, Lady Catherine opposite him, calm and graceful, Miss Vale, silent, and a young man with sandy hair and an uncertain air whom Poirot had not yet met. Sir Adrian introduced him as Hugh Meredith, Lady Catherine's son by her first marriage. Hugh was in his late 20s, with open features and the slightly awkward manner of one unsure of his place. "Stepson," he explained quickly, "but Sir Adrian has always treated me as a son." Poirot inclined his head. "And you live here, Monsieur Meredith?" "For now. I'm helping manage the estate, such as it is." He gave a short laugh. "Not much to manage, truth be told. My stepfather's health keeps him from taking an interest, and I've been at a bit of a loose end lately." Poirot observed him keenly. "A young man of leisure is often a man of secrets," he murmured. The meal passed in uneasy civility. Conversation drifted from weather to politics, but beneath it all ran a taut, invisible thread of tension. Once, when the wind moaned through the chimney, Lady Catherine started so slightly that only Poirot noticed. After dinner, Sir Adrian invited Poirot to his study. The room, reached by a narrow passage, was small and severe, shelves of books, a writing desk, a high-backed chair by the window. Outside, the moor stretched into darkness. "It is here," Sir Adrian said quietly, "that the visitor comes." "Always here." Poirot approached the window. The latch bore faint scratches. "You keep this locked?" "Always. Yet it opens easily." Poirot tried it, the catch lifted with little effort. He noted a faint smudge of soot upon the frame. "Curious," he said softly. "A house full of servants, yet no one to tend the fire properly, or to clean the windows." He turned, his eyes alive with interest. "Tell me, Sir Adrian, did you ever feel that your visitor wished to enter?" Sir Adrian's voice was barely audible. "No, Monsieur Poirot. I think he already has." Chapter 3, The Death at Midnight. The storm had strengthened with the night. By 11 o'clock, the wind was roaring across the moor like a living thing, and rain lashed the windows of Hartleigh House in ceaseless fury. Within, the household had retired early. The servants had long since vanished into their quarters, and the corridors, usually dimly lit, were now entirely dark save for the occasional flicker of lightning. Hercule Poirot sat alone in the small room allotted to him, reading by the light of a single lamp. His valise lay open beside him. Within it, neat as an officer's kit, were his brushes, slippers, and a perfectly folded dressing gown. On the table rested his silver travel clock, which now chimed the half-hour. Hastings had gone to bed some time before, muttering something about ghastly weather and supernatural nonsense. Poirot, however, had no intention of sleeping. He was uneasy. There was, he felt, something out of tune in Hartleigh House, something that hummed beneath the surface like a faint vibration. It was not merely fear, nor guilt, nor greed, though each played its part. No, it was a tension that bound the occupants together in silence, each wary of what the night might bring. He rose, adjusted his moustache, and moved quietly to the window. Outside, the garden lay half lost in mist. The moor beyond appeared as a vast, dark sea, rippling beneath the wind. Then, as the clock in the corridor struck 12, Poirot heard it, the faint scrape of gravel below. He leaned forward. For an instant, illuminated by a flash of lightning, a dark shape appeared near the study window, tall, cloaked, motionless. Then, as swiftly as it had come, it was gone. Poirot did not cry out, nor did he move at once. Instead, he stood perfectly still, his mind racing. So, he murmured, the visitor returns. But who welcomes him, eh? Moments later, a scream tore through the stillness, a woman's voice, high and terrible. Poirot seized his dressing gown and hurried into the corridor, where Hastings was already emerging, pale and dishevelled. What the devil was that? Hastings cried. The inevitable, mon ami, said Poirot grimly. It has come. They raced down the passage, Miss Vale's terrified voice calling from below. Monsieur Poirot. Oh, hurry! In the study, the air was thick and cold. The fire had gone out, leaving the room in shadows broken only by the unsteady light of a single candle. At the desk, Sir Adrian Lytton sat slumped forward, his head resting upon his arm. A single sheet of paper lay before him, blotched with ink. Poirot approached slowly, every movement precise. Do not touch anything, he commanded. Hastings, the window, see, it stands open. The rain had blown in, darkening the carpet. Poirot bent to examine the sill. There were no muddy footprints, only a faint smear, as though a gloved hand had brushed against the frame. Locked from the inside, Hastings observed, testing the handle of the door. Good Lord, Poirot, he's dead. Poirot nodded once. Yes. But not by his own hand. Sir Adrian's face, when turned to the light, was pale and strangely peaceful, though a faint mark encircled his throat, a thin bruise, darkening even as they watched. In his right hand he clutched a small silver object. Poirot lifted it gently with his handkerchief, an Egyptian amulet in the shape of a scarab beetle. Miss Vale sank into a chair, trembling. It has come true, she whispered. I told you death would come before the week was out. Courage, mademoiselle, said Poirot softly. The time for fear is over, the time for reason begins. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving a grey and heavy calm. The police from the nearest town had come and gone, baffled but respectful. The local constable, a good-hearted man with large boots and small imagination, had suggested suicide. Poirot had merely smiled, raised his eyebrows, and declined to comment. Now, in the pale light of morning, Poirot examined the study once more. Hastings stood nearby, rubbing his eyes and drinking tepid coffee from a tray Miss Vale had brought. You're certain it wasn't suicide? He asked. Poirot looked at him over the rim of his cup. My dear Hastings, a man cannot strangle himself, lock the door behind him, and die peacefully at his desk clutching a trinket. None. There is too much order in this disorder. It was arranged, beautifully arranged, to seem impossible. He knelt beside the hearth, where the ashes were still faintly warm. Something caught his eye, a small metallic glint among the grey dust. With delicate fingers, he retrieved it. A cufflink, he said. Gold, engraved with the letter H. Curious, is it not? Hugh Meredith, Hastings murmured. Perhaps. Or perhaps not. Let us not run too far, mon ami. The letter H is not an uncommon one. Poirot smiled faintly. But we file it away here. He tapped his forehead. Order and method, always. He moved to the window next. There, on the frame, he saw the faint smudge he had noticed the night before, soot, dark and greasy. He examined it closely. A fireplace has not caused this. No. This is from a lantern, perhaps, or a lamp, carried by one who wished not to be seen. Hastings frowned. A servant, maybe. Poirot shook his head. The servants have no reason to enter by the window, my friend. No, the visitor came thus, and the visitor left thus. He turned his gaze to the desk. Upon the paper before Sir Adrian was written only a few words, smeared and incomplete. I know the truth at last. Poirot regarded the phrase for a long time. Then, quietly, he said, he knew. But of what? Breakfast was a strained affair. Lady Catherine appeared pale but composed, her movements graceful as ever, though her eyes were rimmed with red. Hugh Meredith, by contrast, looked shattered. He sat with his head in his hands, staring at his untouched plate. Poirot took in every detail, the tremor in Miss Vale's hands as she poured the tea, the stiffness of Lady Catherine's smile, the flicker of hostility that passed between her and the young man. At last, Lady Catherine spoke. You must understand, Monsieur Poirot, my husband's health had been failing. His nerves, his mind, even, were not what they once were. He had been haunted by these fancies, this visitor. It is not impossible that... Pardon, madam, Poirot interrupted gently, but Sir Adrian did not take his own life. He was strangled. You will forgive my bluntness, but I do not deal in fancies. There was a sharp intake of breath around the table. Lady Catherine's hand flew to her throat. Strangled, she whispered. Yes. By someone he knew, someone he allowed near him, someone he did not fear. Poirot rose slowly. The door was locked, yes, but the window was open. The murderer entered that way, or wished us to think so. But why should one so careful as Sir Adrian leave his window unlatched in a storm? Hastings frowned. Then it was staged. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Exactly. The question is by whom, and for what purpose? He glanced around the room. This, my friends, was not the work of a madman or a ghost. It was the work of a mind both patient and precise. And such minds, he added softly, do not act without reason. He turned to Lady Catherine. I shall ask that no one leave Hartleigh House. Until I have spoken to you all, each, in turn, we are all, how you say, in the net. Lady Catherine's voice trembled. Monsieur Poirot, do you think the murderer is one of us? Poirot's gaze swept the table, calm and unyielding. Madam, he said, I never think. I know. And as the silence fell, the grandfather clock in the hall began to strike the hour, slow, deliberate chimes that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the house itself. Chapter 4 of The Circle of Suspects. Morning had come to Hartleigh House, pale and cheerless. The storm had passed, but the air was heavy with the lingering scent of rain and smoke. A low mist clung to the lawns, and the moor beyond the trees looked desolate, colourless, infinite. In the dining room, the fire had been rekindled, yet it brought little warmth. Lady Catherine sat by the hearth, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face composed but bloodless. Hugh Meredith stood near the window, staring out with an air of restless guilt. Miss Vale, still in black, poured tea with trembling fingers. At the head of the table, Hercule Poirot sat upright, immaculate as ever, a small notebook before him and a pen held with delicate precision. He had slept scarcely 2 hours, yet his eyes were clear and bright. "I must beg your indulgence," he began, "for what will not be a pleasant morning. When there has been a death of violence, it is my duty to ask many questions, some of which may wound your pride or your heart. But the truth, Miss Amiss, demands no less." No one spoke. The crackle of the fire filled the silence. Poirot turned first to Lady Catherine. "Madam, we begin with you." She met his gaze calmly, though her fingers tightened upon the arm of her chair. "I have already told the police all I know, Monsieur Poirot. My husband went to his study at 10:30, and I did not see him alive again." "And after dinner, madam, what did you do?" "I read for a while in the drawing room. I was tired and went to bed just before 11. Poirot nodded. "Alone?" A faint flush rose to her cheeks. "Yes, alone." "Forgive me, but I must ask, did you and your husband quarrel yesterday?" She hesitated, then sighed. "No more than usual. He was irritable of late. Suspicious, even. He accused me of things I had not done, imagined betrayals where none existed." "Betrayals?" Poirot repeated softly. She shrugged. "He thought I cared more for his fortune than for him. It was absurd. I loved him." Her voice faltered ever so slightly, and Poirot observed the tremor of her hands. "You wear perfume, madam?" he asked suddenly. "Yes, jasmine." "Why?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Because the scent lingered in your husband's study. A small thing, perhaps, but the smallest things, they are the most revealing." Lady Catherine's composure stiffened. "Then someone must have entered after I left him. I have not been near the study since dinner." "Très bien," Poirot murmured, making a note. "We shall see." He turned next to Hugh Meredith. The young man looked weary, his eyes shadowed with grief, or perhaps something more. "Mr. Meredith," Poirot said gently, "you and your stepfather were not always, how do you say, simpatico?" Hugh gave a short, bitter laugh. "That's putting it mildly. We quarrelled often enough. Over money. Over everything. He thought me idle and irresponsible. Perhaps he was right. I've no head for business, no taste for estate matters. But last night," he stopped, swallowing hard. "Last night I went to his study before dinner. I tried to make peace. We argued again, but it was nothing serious. I went out for a walk afterward, to clear my head. I wasn't anywhere near the study at midnight, if that's what you're thinking." "Where did you walk, monsieur?" "Across the North Meadow." "I can't prove it. It was raining like the devil. But I was alone." Poirot studied him. "And your cuff-link, monsieur, did you lose it recently?" Hugh blinked. "My cuff-link?" "Yes. One was found in the ashes of the study fireplace." The young man's colour drained. I did have a pair with the letter H. One's missing. I hadn't noticed until now." Hastings, standing by the door, gave a low whistle. "That looks rather bad, old chapter." Poirot silenced him with a glance. "Let us not jump to conclusions, Hastings. Monsieur Meredith, can you think of any reason why your cufflink should find itself in your stepfather's fire?" Hugh shook his head, bewildered. "None. Unless he took it himself. He sometimes borrowed things from me. He said they amused him." Poirot inclined his head slightly, though his eyes remained unreadable. "It is possible," he said softly. "Yes, it is possible. Finally, Poirot turned to Miss Vale. She sat very straight, her hands folded upon her lap, her expression composed. Yet beneath her calm, Poirot sensed a depth of fear she could not conceal. "Mademoiselle," he said, "you have been in this house the longest, n'est-ce pas? For 20 years, Monsieur Poirot. Then you know well its rooms, its secrets, its people. Tell me, what did you hear last night?" She hesitated. "I was in my room, above the library. I could not sleep. The storm was dreadful. Then, around midnight, I heard footsteps in the corridor, slow, deliberate. I thought perhaps it was Sir Adrian himself, but the sound came from near the study. Then there was a thud, a chair falling, perhaps, and silence. You did not go to see." "I was afraid." Poirot regarded her closely. "Afraid of what, mademoiselle? Of the visitor? Or of what the visitor might reveal?" Her lips trembled. "You think I had anything to do with it?" Poirot raised a hand. "I think nothing. I only observe. You said in your letter that murder would come before the week was out. You must have had reason to write so dramatic a prophecy." She looked down at her clasped hands. Sir Adrian had been strange of late. He spoke of changing his will, of punishing those who deceived him. He said terrible things, that death would be better than betrayal. I feared that someone in this house meant him harm." "And who, mademoiselle," asked Poirot softly, "did you fear most?" She hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Lady Catherine." There was a small gasp from Hastings, but Poirot merely nodded, as though confirming a suspicion he already held. "Ah. The loyal governess fears the beautiful young wife. It is an old story, is it not?" Miss Vale's eyes flashed. "You mock me, Monsieur Poirot, but I tell you she is dangerous. Sir Adrian was a proud man, too proud to see that he was being deceived. And now he is dead." Poirot closed his notebook. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have given me much to consider." When the questioning was done, Poirot and Hastings retired to the library. Hastings was restless, pacing before the fire. "Well, you've 3 fine suspects, Poirot. Lady Catherine, the scent of jasmine. Meredith, the cufflink. And Miss Vale, the letter predicting murder. Which is it?" Poirot smiled faintly. "You forget, mon ami, that appearances are deceptive. Each of these good people tells us the truth, as they know it. But the truth is a coat that fits differently on every shoulder." He rose, smoothing his moustache thoughtfully. "Lady Catherine lies with grace, she lies to protect. Mademoiselle Vale speaks truth tinged with malice, she fears what she cannot control. And young Meredith, he is the most interesting of all. He tells the truth, but not all of it." "What's your next move?" asked Hastings. Poirot looked toward the window. Outside, the mist was thickening again, swallowing the garden in grey. "I shall see the study once more. There is something I missed, something that was meant to be missed. And when I find it, Hastings, the visitor of midnight will lose his mask." He smiled, a small, knowing smile that caught the firelight. "You see, mon ami, the murderer believes himself clever. But Hercule Poirot," he tapped his temple lightly, "has the advantage of the little grey cells. And they, I assure you, never sleep." Chapter 5, The Visitor Appears. The night came down upon Hartleigh House with unnatural swiftness, as though the sun itself had retreated in fear. A strange hush had settled over the moor, even the wind seemed to pause before the great house, unwilling to disturb its heavy silence. By 8 o'clock, the household had withdrawn to their rooms, save for Poirot and Hastings, who remained in the library. A single lamp glowed upon the table, its light golden and subdued. The fire burned low, casting long fingers of shadow along the shelves. Hastings stirred restlessly in his chair. "You mean to keep watch again tonight?" "But naturally, mon ami," Poirot replied. "The murderer, he will not rest. Fear, guilt, they are poor sleepers. And besides, the visitor has kept his appointment each night. Why should he fail us now?" Hastings shivered. "You make it sound as though we're inviting him." Poirot smiled faintly. "In a sense, we are. There is always a moment, Hastings, when the criminal must return to the scene of his triumph, or his failure. He cannot resist it. It is a need within the soul, a magnet that draws him back to his own handiwork." He rose, adjusted his cuffs, and crossed to the window. The night beyond was absolute. No moon broke through the clouds, no stars showed their faces. Only the reflection of the lamplight stared back at him from the glass. At 11:30, Miss Vale entered quietly. She carried a tray of coffee, her expression grave. "I thought you might need this," she said. "No one else will sleep tonight." Poirot thanked her with a courteous bow. "You are kind, mademoiselle. And how do you feel now that another night is upon us?" She hesitated. "Afraid. I cannot help it, Monsieur Poirot. The house feels wrong. I hear things, small noises in the walls, creaks on the stairs. And every time I close my eyes, I see him, Sir Adrian, sitting just as he was, his head upon his arm." Poirot nodded gently. "Yes. Death leaves its echo, does it not? But we must remember, the dead do not return. It is the living who walk at midnight." Her face blanched. "Do you mean?" "I mean," he said softly, "that you would do well to bolt your door and sleep, mademoiselle. Leave the visitor to me." After she had gone, Hastings looked at Poirot uneasily. "You don't really think?" Poirot lifted a hand. "Hush. It is better not to think, but to observe. The truth, it will come quietly, like a thief." The clock on the mantel ticked toward midnight. Each second seemed louder than the last, until the air itself was taut with waiting. 11:59, said Hastings in a whisper. Poirot's eyes never left the window. "Be still, mon ami. He comes." Outside, the rain began again, soft at first, then heavier, drumming upon the panes. Through it, faint and muffled, came a sound like the scraping, as of shoes upon gravel. Poirot's head turned sharply. "Do you hear, Hastings?" "Yes, there, by the study window." They moved swiftly through the corridor, Poirot stepped silent, Hastings stumbling behind. The house was utterly dark save for the narrow beam of Poirot's electric torch. It cut a thin path through the gloom, glinting on picture frames and brass door handles. When they reached the study door, Poirot held up a hand for silence. A faint sound came from within, the rustle of fabric, the creak of the floorboards. "The door is locked," Hastings whispered. Poirot's voice was barely audible. "Then the visitor is within." He turned the handle gently. It yielded. The door swung open. For a moment they saw nothing. Then a sudden flash of lightning illuminated the room, and there, by the window, stood a figure. Tall. Cloaked. Motionless. The head was turned toward them, the face lost in shadow. In one pale hand gleamed a small lantern, in the other, something glinted like metal. Hastings gave an involuntary cry. "Good God!" Poirot's voice cut through the darkness, calm, commanding. "Do not move, monsieur, or madam. The game is ended." The figure started, faltered, then turned to flee. Poirot darted forward with surprising speed, catching the cloak by its edge. There was a struggle, a brief, desperate struggle, and then the lantern clattered to the floor. The cloak slipped free. The figure crumpled to the ground, trembling, gasping for air. The beam of Poirot's torch fell upon the face, pale, tear-streaked, unmistakable. "Miss Vale," said Poirot quietly. Hastings gaped. "Miss Vale! What the deuce?" She sobbed uncontrollably. I didn't mean harm. I swear it. I only wanted to frighten him, to make him see reason." Poirot helped her to her feet with gentle firmness. "Sit, mademoiselle. You will tell us all." Through tears, Miss Vale confessed that she had been the visitor. For weeks, she had crept to Sir Adrian's window, cloaked and silent, hoping to terrify him into changing his will. He meant to cut Lady Catherine off, leave everything to some foreign trust. "I thought she'd be ruined. I only meant to scare him into pity," she cried. "But that night, when I came as before, he was already dead. I saw him sitting there, head bowed. I thought he was ignoring me. I fled. I never went near him again." Poirot regarded her gravely. "You are certain of this?" "On my soul, yes." "And the lantern?" "I used it to see my way across the garden. I left no mark, I swear it." Poirot considered her for a long moment, then nodded. "You speak truth, though not the whole of it. Still, I believe you did not kill him." Miss Vale looked up in astonishment. "Then who did?" "That, mademoiselle," said Poirot, "we shall soon discover." Later, when she had been escorted to her room, Hastings turned to Poirot in bewilderment. "I don't understand. If she was the visitor, then what are we looking for? The case is done." Poirot shook his head. "No, Hastings. It has only begun. Consider, she came to frighten, not to kill. She arrived after the murder. And yet the legend of the midnight visitor, who began it? Who told Sir Adrian that he would be visited? Why? No, my friend, someone used Miss Vale's folly as cover for their own purpose." He bent to retrieve the fallen lantern. On its brass handle, faintly visible, was a smear of something dark. Poirot touched it lightly, then held his fingers to the light. "Soot, and oil," he murmured. "The same as on the window latch. Voila! The clue returns to greet us." Hastings frowned. "But what does it mean?" Poirot smiled. "It means that the murderer entered through the window before the visitor ever came. When Miss Vale arrived, she saw only what she was meant to see, a man already dead. And thus, she became our perfect distraction." He closed the lantern gently, his eyes shining. "Ah, Hastings, how delicate is the art of crime. It is like a waltz, one misstep, and all is revealed. And soon, very soon, we shall see who led the dance." As they left the study, a fresh gust of wind swept through the corridor, extinguishing the last candle. Somewhere deep within the house, a clock struck one. Hastings glanced nervously at his companion. "So, Poirot, what now?" Poirot smiled into the darkness. "Now, my friend, we wait. For guilt, it cannot keep silence forever. And when it speaks, Hercule Poirot will be listening." Chapter 6, Secrets in the Study. Morning broke once more over Hartleigh House, but the air within was colder than ever. The great rooms seemed hollow, as though they resented the daylight. Servants moved quietly along the corridors, whispering in corners, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear. In the study, Poirot stood before the desk where Sir Adrian Meredith had met his end. The detective's compact figure was immaculate, his suit pressed to perfection, his shoes polished to a mirror sheen. Yet his expression was one of deep concentration. Every object on the desk had been placed with deliberate care, by him. Hastings, half drowsy from another sleepless night, stood by the door. "Honestly, Poirot," you've turned that desk inside out. I can't see what you expect to find. Poirot straightened a stack of letters with delicate precision. Ah, but you see nothing, mon ami, because you look for what should be here. I, on the other hand, look for what is missing. Missing? Precisely. Sir Adrian was a man of habit, yes? Every evening he wrote in his journal, I have confirmed this with Miss Vale. Yet there is no entry for the night of his death, nor the night before. That, Hastings, is a silence most eloquent. Hastings frowned. Perhaps he was too ill, or distracted. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Or perhaps he wrote something that another person could not afford to let survive. He crossed to the fireplace, kneeling before the grate. The ashes were cold, grey, undisturbed since the night of the murder. Carefully, with the tip of a silver letter opener, Poirot sifted through them. A few charred fragments fluttered loose. Hastings bent closer. Just ashes. Mais non. Poirot lifted a small corner of paper between two fingers. Observe, Hastings, the ink has run, yet one can still read a part of a word. Deceit, it is enough. Deceit, perhaps. Or to deceive. Poirot nodded. A confession, a warning, or an accusation. Whichever it was, someone destroyed it. Someone who feared its meaning. He placed the fragment gently into an envelope. You see, Hastings, we begin to reconstruct the night not from the grand gestures, but from the whispers. The murderer spoke in ashes, and we must listen. At 9:30, Poirot requested the presence of Lady Catherine in the study. She entered with the air of a woman on trial. Her face was pale but composed, her dark hair was perfectly arranged, though her eyes betrayed a sleepless night. Lady Catherine, Poirot said, bowing slightly. Forgive the intrusion, but I must trouble you with a delicate question. When your husband died, he left no new will among his papers. Did you know of one being prepared? She hesitated, fingers tightening around the silver locket at her throat. Yes. He had spoken of it. I believe he meant to alter certain provisions, but he would not say how. Did that disturb you? She looked up, her eyes steady. Would it not disturb anyone, Monsieur Poirot, to hear one's husband speak of changing his will with such secrecy? Poirot inclined his head. Indeed. But you must forgive my curiosity, did you perhaps have reason to fear what those changes might mean for you? Her lips pressed together. I feared he meant to disinherit me. He had grown suspicious. He accused me of things I had never done. Such as? She gave a short, brittle laugh. Infidelity, of course. It amused him to believe himself betrayed. But there was no other man. Poirot's gaze flickered toward her hand. Then the letter found upon your dressing table, the one signed H, how do you explain that? Lady Catherine's eyes widened. What letter? The one addressed to you, written in a man's hand, with words of, how shall I say, affection. Her shock seemed genuine. I have no such letter. Poirot's tone remained gentle. It was discovered last night by Inspector Grange. A brief note only, meet me when the storm begins. The truth cannot wait. H. She swayed slightly, her hand gripping the back of a chair. But, good heavens, it's impossible. I know no such man. Poirot's expression was unreadable. And yet the initial matches your stepson's. Do you deny that he might have written it? Her eyes flashed. I do. Hugh may despise me, but he would never stoop to such treachery. Poirot nodded gravely. Very well. I do not accuse. I merely gather threads. And you, Lady Catherine, are one of several. As she turned to leave, she said quietly, whoever killed him, Monsieur Poirot, did not kill merely a man, they destroyed a life built upon fear. My husband had enemies, yes, but none so cruel as his own mistrust. Poirot watched her go, his fingers lightly tapping his chin. Enemies within, Hastings, he murmured. A household divided by secrets. And somewhere among them, murder. Later that morning, Poirot summoned Hugh Meredith. The young man entered reluctantly, his expression strained. "Hugh," said Poirot, motioning him to sit, "we must speak plainly. You were found to have lost a cufflink near the scene. Tell me, why were you truly out that night?" Hugh hesitated. "I told you I went walking." Poirot smiled gently. "Ah, yes. The Englishman and his walk in the rain. But you see, I am Belgian, and for us, a midnight stroll in a storm is not a pastime but a puzzle. Perhaps you will help me solve it." The young man's composure faltered. "I went to the village inn. There's a telephone there. I had to make a call." "To whom?" "To my solicitor," he admitted quietly. "I wanted to know if my stepfather could revoke the trust my mother left me. I was afraid he might cut me off entirely." Poirot's gaze softened. "Then you feared financial ruin, n'est-ce pas? That fear, it can drive men to terrible acts." Hugh's eyes darkened. "You think I killed him for money?" "I think," said Poirot slowly, "that you had cause to wish him dead. But I do not yet know whether you had the courage or the opportunity." He paused, studying the young man keenly. "Tell me, monsieur, did you love your stepmother?" Hugh started violently. "What? No. I respected her, pitied her, perhaps, but love? Certainly not." Poirot merely smiled. "Ah. Then perhaps someone else did." When Hugh had gone, Poirot sat alone for a time, the morning sunlight falling in stripes across the study floor. From his pocket, he drew a small notebook and read a few notes aloud in a low voice. Lady Catherine fears disinheritance. Miss Vale fears exposure. Hugh Meredith fears poverty. All three fear the truth. He rose, glancing once more at the desk. His eyes lingered on a small brass key resting near the inkwell, a key so ordinary it might have escaped notice. Poirot picked it up delicately. "The key to the cabinet," murmured Hastings. Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami. The key to the truth. Observe, there are scratches upon it, fresh ones. Someone forced it into a lock it did not fit. A desperate act, no. But whose lock?" Poirot smiled, his moustache twitching. "That, my dear Hastings, we shall soon discover. For this key belongs not to Sir Adrian's cabinet, but to another room entirely." He slipped it into his pocket and straightened his tie. "Come, Hastings. There is more than one secret hidden in Hartleigh House. And one of them, I fancy, lies behind a locked door." That evening, as the mist rose again over the moor, Poirot returned once more to the study. The firelight flickered, the air still faintly scented of jasmine. He stood before the window where death had come, his reflection merging with the night beyond. "The visitor came by darkness," he whispered. "But the murderer, Hastings, the murderer came by deceit." He turned toward the door, his eyes alive with certainty. Tomorrow, the mask shall fall. The final act begins. Chapter 7, The Unmasking. The following afternoon found Hartleigh House cloaked once more in mist, the moor beyond swallowed by grey. Within, the air was heavy with anticipation. The servants moved in silence, avoiding the study where Hercule Poirot had spent the entire morning arranging what he called the little performance. By 4 o'clock, all the household, Lady Catherine, Hugh Meredith, Miss Vale, and Inspector Grange, had gathered at Poirot's request. The detective stood near the fireplace, small and dignified, his silver-grey suit immaculate, his moustache gleaming like twin strokes of ivory. "My friends," he began, his voice calm but resonant, "we have come to the end of our labyrinth. Each of you knows more than you have said. Each of you holds a fragment of the truth. Today, we shall fit those fragments together, voila, into the complete picture." Lady Catherine drew herself up proudly. "If you mean to accuse me again, Monsieur Poirot, I warn you." Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, madam. I accuse no one. I only seek order where there has been chaos. That is the gift of the little grey cells, you understand." Hugh Meredith muttered, "I think we've had enough of riddles. Either you know the murderer or you don't." Poirot turned to him mildly. "Ah, but I do, monsieur. Only, before I name the guilty, I must show you how cleverly you have all been deceived." A rustle of unease went through the room. Miss Vale clasped her hands tightly, her eyes darting from face to face. Poirot moved toward the desk, the very one where Sir Adrian had died. Upon it lay three objects, a silver cufflink, the small brass key, and the fragment of burned paper he had rescued from the ashes. "These," said Poirot softly, "are the voice of the dead man. If you listen, they tell his story." He began to pace slowly, speaking as though to himself. Sir Adrian was a man haunted by suspicion. He distrusted his wife, his stepson, even his faithful governess. He was, as Lady Catherine so truly said, destroying his own peace with jealousy. And yet, he was not mad. He was methodical, intelligent. When such a man begins to fear betrayal, he does not shout, he writes. He tapped the burned fragment. This, I believe, was the last page of his journal. The word deceit begins here. He meant to record a deceit uncovered. But before he could finish, death came. Someone destroyed that page to hide its meaning. Hastings leaned forward. Then the murderer burned it after killing him. Just so, Poirot said. But in haste, mon ami. Always in haste. He looked around the room. Now, we come to the visitor. Miss Vale, you were that shadow at the window, were you not? Miss Vale nodded miserably. Yes. But I swear I never harmed him. I believe you, said Poirot gently. You came at midnight to frighten, not to kill. You saw him seated at his desk, motionless, and thought he ignored you. But in truth, he was already dead. Lady Catherine shuddered. How dreadful. Yes, Poirot said softly. But what interests me most is not when Sir Adrian died, but how the murderer entered. The window latch was marked with soot and oil. Someone forced it open with a tool, and from inside the room. Why should one do that, unless to make it appear the intruder had come from outside? Inspector Grange stirred. A staged burglary, then? Exactly. A deception, mon cher Inspector. A deceit, the deceit that Sir Adrian had discovered. Poirot picked up the brass key from the desk and held it between finger and thumb. And now, we come to this. At first, I believed it to be the key to Sir Adrian's cabinet. It was not. It fits another lock entirely, that of Miss Vale's writing desk. Miss Vale gasped. Mine? But I never? Poirot nodded calmly. You did not place it here. Someone did, to turn suspicion upon you. The scratches upon it show it was forced into a lock that resisted. The murderer had hoped to obtain a letter kept there, a letter that Sir Adrian himself had written to you only days before his death. Her face turned ashen. How do you know that? Because I found the torn corner of an envelope in your wastebasket, bearing his seal. And because the handwriting on the burnt paper matches his. Hastings frowned. But why would he write to Miss Vale? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, that is the heart of our little drama. Sir Adrian had discovered that someone he trusted had been corresponding with a London solicitor, someone arranging a new will in secret. He assumed it was Lady Catherine, perhaps even feared she conspired with Hugh. But he was wrong. The person behind the new will was Miss Vale. A collective gasp filled the room. Miss Vale's voice broke. No. I did it for him. He wished to alter his estate to aid the village, to end the family quarrels. I only followed his instructions. Poirot inclined his head. And yet, when he spoke of betrayal, he used the word the deceit. Tell me, mademoiselle, did you not also write to the solicitor in your own name? Her lips parted. Yes, to hasten matters. He trusted me to handle his papers. Then consider, Poirot said quietly, what Lady Catherine or Hugh might think if they discovered such letters in your hand. Would it not appear that you, too, sought to control his fortune? Miss Vale covered her face. Dear God, I never meant harm. Poirot's gaze softened. No, mademoiselle. You meant devotion, but secrecy breeds suspicion. And suspicion breeds tragedy. He turned now to Hugh Meredith, who had gone pale. You, monsieur, also received a letter from Sir Adrian that night, one you did not destroy. It lies in your jacket pocket. Hugh started violently. How do you? Poirot smiled. I saw its corner when you reached for your handkerchief. If you please. With trembling hands, Hugh produced the folded paper. Poirot unfolded it and read aloud. You think I do not know your mother's fortune is gone, and that you live on mine. But there will be no more deception. Tonight, we speak as men. Poirot lowered the letter. So you see, Hastings, he had arranged a meeting with his stepson that very night. But the meeting never took place. Why? Because another came first. Lady Catherine's voice trembled. Who? Poirot's eyes met hers. You, madam. A stunned silence fell. Lady Catherine's hand flew to her throat. You accuse me? Poirot's voice was almost tender. I accuse no one without pity, but the truth, she is a demanding mistress. You entered this room before midnight to plead with your husband. You wore jasmine perfume, it lingered long after you fled. You saw the revolver upon the desk. You took it, not in malice, but in despair. There was a struggle, a cry, an accident or impulse, it fired. You believed him dead. In panic, you staged a false intrusion, opening the window to suggest a break-in. Lady Catherine's breath came fast, her eyes wide and glistening. How could you know? Poirot's gaze was gentle. Because your sleeve was torn, madam, and repaired hastily this morning. Because the powder burn upon the cuff of your gown betrayed a shot fired at close range. And because, in your fear, you forgot one thing, Sir Adrian's watch stopped at 11:45, not midnight. A sob escaped her. He was going to cast me out. Everything, gone. I only meant to frighten him, to make him listen. Poirot bowed his head slightly. I know. And yet, the act remains. The visitor came at midnight, but death had arrived a quarter hour before. Lady Catherine sank into a chair, her hands trembling. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece, relentless, final. Poirot sighed softly. It is over. The truth, she has shown her face. There is no triumph in such moments, Hastings, only sorrow. A man lies dead, a woman's life is broken, and all because love, when mixed with pride, becomes the most dangerous deceit of all. He turned toward the window, where the mist was lifting, revealing the distant line of the moor. Come, my friend. Let us leave them to the law. The mystery, she is solved, but the heart, alas, remains a riddle forever. Chapter 8, Poirot's Final Revelation. The grey dawn crept slowly over Hartleigh House, painting the world in the colour of ashes. The storm had gone, the moor lay still and silver under a veil of mist. Yet within the ancient house, a heavy silence lingered, the silence that follows confession. Lady Catherine Meredith sat in the small morning room, her face pale but composed. She had not slept. Opposite her, Inspector Grange wrote steadily in his notebook, his manner brisk, impersonal. In the corner, Miss Vale knelt before the fire, weeping softly. Hugh Meredith stood by the window, his eyes fixed upon the bleak horizon. And in the centre of the room, as calm and precise as ever, stood Hercule Poirot. His grey suit was immaculate, his moustache immaculate, and yet there was a gravity to his eyes that spoke of pity more than triumph. When Inspector Grange finished his notes, he rose. "I'll have to take her statement in full, Mr. Poirot. I suppose there's no doubt left." Poirot inclined his head. "None, monsieur. The facts, they are simple now. The motive, the means, the opportunity, all belong to Lady Catherine. But permit me, before you proceed, to make a few observations. There is still one thing that troubles the little grey cells." Grange hesitated. "One thing?" Poirot nodded gravely. "Yes. The question that is always the last to be asked, and yet, in truth, the first. Why, precisely, did Sir Adrian die that night?" Grange frowned. "Why? You've said it yourself, quarrel, passion, accident." Poirot's voice was soft but firm. "Ah, but accidents, they do not happen by coincidence, mon cher. They happen by design, the design of emotion, of circumstance. And sometimes, they happen because another hand makes them so." All eyes turned toward him. Hugh straightened, his face tense. Miss Vale looked up from her weeping. "What do you mean?" Lady Catherine whispered. Poirot stepped forward. "Madam, when I said you fired the shot, I did not lie. But I did not say you killed your husband." A murmur went around the room. He continued calmly, "When the revolver discharged, the bullet struck Sir Adrian's shoulder. It was not a mortal wound. The angle, the distance, I measured them myself this morning. He would have lived, had someone not altered his fate." Lady Catherine rose, eyes wide. "You mean someone finished it?" After I ran." "Precisely." Poirot's tone grew colder. "Someone who found him wounded but alive. Someone who saw opportunity in the tragedy you had begun. Someone who wished Sir Adrian dead for reasons of their own." Inspector Grange's pen froze. "You mean there's another culprit?" Poirot nodded. "Oui, monsieur. There always was." He moved to the window, gazing out across the moor. "Consider, Miss Amos. Who had the most to gain by Sir Adrian's death? Not Lady Catherine, she was in despair. Not Miss Vale, her position depended entirely on his life. But Hugh Meredith, there lies the puzzle." Hugh's face flushed. "That's outrageous. You've already proved she shot him." "Just so," Poirot said evenly. "But you forget, I am a man of precision. The shot, she did not kill, the death, it came later, by suffocation. A pillow, pressed upon the wound while he lay unconscious. That, I found traces of this morning upon the blood-stained cushion discarded behind the curtain." Hastings, standing near the door, gasped. "Good heavens, Poirot!" "Yes," Poirot said quietly. "The bullet weakened him, the hand that ended him was deliberate." Hugh's voice broke. "You can't prove that. You've no evidence." Poirot turned sharply, his eyes gleaming. "No evidence?" But I have motive, monsieur. And motive is the seed from which crime grows. You feared your stepfather would destroy your inheritance. He told you so in his letter. You came to this room not long after Lady Catherine fled. You found him bleeding, struggling to breathe. You saw your chance. One small act, and all your troubles would vanish. The young man trembled. You're mad. Non, monsieur. Only observant. Poirot took a small object from his pocket and held it up, a silver cufflink, engraved with the letter H. This, I found in the grate. The mate to the one you lost. It bears not soot, but blood. You pressed your hand to his wound, perhaps to steady yourself, and left behind the proof. Hugh stared, his mouth working soundlessly. Poirot continued, relentless but controlled. You then forced open the window to feign a burglary, the same act Lady Catherine had already attempted. Two deceptions, layered one upon the other, until even you did not know which would prevail. But alas, monsieur, lies are like the smoke from that fire, they drift, they cling, and in the end, they betray the one who breathes them. There was a long silence. The ticking of the mantel clock filled it. Then, with a strangled cry, Hugh sank into a chair, covering his face. It's true, he said hoarsely. I didn't mean to kill him. I thought he'd done for her. I saw the blood and thought she was lost. I only wanted to end it quickly, to save her the shame. Poirot regarded him gravely. You wished to save her, and yet you doomed her. That, monsieur, is the irony of crime. It is never as simple as mercy. Lady Catherine covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing. Oh, Hugh, what have you done? He looked up at her, his face grey. Everything for you. And now it's nothing. Poirot turned away, his expression unreadable. There is no victory here. Only the truth, and she is cold comfort indeed. Inspector Grange cleared his throat heavily. Well, that's that, then. I'll have to take him into custody. The rest, the court can settle. Poirot inclined his head. Do your duty, monsieur. But treat him with kindness. He has punished himself already. As the inspector led Hugh away, Lady Catherine collapsed into the nearest chair, trembling. Poirot approached her, his voice low and gentle. Courage, madam. You are free, but remember, freedom bought by tragedy is a sorrowful gift. She looked up at him through tears. You knew, even last night, didn't you? You let me think I was guilty. Poirot smiled faintly. Sometimes, madam, the truth must be allowed to ripen. It was necessary that he see the burden of your confession. Only then would his own guilt speak. She bowed her head. And what will become of him? Poirot spread his hands. That, I cannot say. The law will decide. But remember, he loved you, too much, perhaps. It is always thus. Love, when it grows desperate, becomes its own destroyer. That evening, the house grew quiet again. The police had gone. Miss Vale had retired in tears. Only Poirot and Hastings remained in the library, where the fire burned low and steady. Hastings sat with his hands clasped, staring into the flames. I don't understand you sometimes, Poirot. You seem almost sorry for them. Poirot's voice was soft. Ah, mon ami, but of course. I am sorry for them. Murder, it is not merely the taking of life, but is the failure of the human soul to bear its own pain. Lady Catherine feared disgrace, Hugh feared loss, Miss Vale feared loneliness. And in the shadow of those fears, a good man died. He leaned back, his eyes distant. Do you know, Hastings, that is what makes crime so fascinating to me? Not the cunning of the deed, but the weakness that drives it. Every murderer believes himself justified until the end. Hastings sighed. Still, I can't help feeling it's all so sad. Poirot nodded. Yes, mon ami. It is sad. But it is also life. Order must be restored, even when hearts are broken. That is the task of Hercule Poirot. He rose, smoothing his coat, and looked once more toward the window where the dawn had begun to brighten the mist. Come, Hastings. Let us go. The mystery is ended, and the ghosts of Hartleigh House may rest at last. And together they stepped out into the pale morning, leaving behind the house of secrets, where the scent of jasmine lingered still.